What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So we've had the Xbox showcase and the PlayStation State of Play. Now, Nintendo fans are kind of hanging out waiting for Nintendo to have their own event with that rumored Direct coming up at the end of this month. But we are starting to see some things happen here, with one game apparently leaking out from retailers a bit early, and another one being teased by a developer for a big anniversary, and we're going to go over those here today. Also, we are going to be talking about the Nintendo 64 expansion pack service, as we found out when the last game in that roadmap is coming out, making us wonder what's next. And we're also going to be talking about Halo Infinite, as it looks like the Forge mode could be a bit bigger than we originally thought. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, and if you're new here to the Smallwood channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're going to start today with Sonic Origins. It's out this week, June 23rd, and there have been a lot of criticisms around it. Digital only, the chart they released so you can figure out, okay, what's coming with the version that I'm buying. But one big question was around the soundtrack, specifically for Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and if it would be changed. Well, we can see this over on Twitter from Sonic the Hedgehog News and Updates, where they say, Sega on Sonic 3 and Knuckles partially adapted soundtrack in Sonic Origins. We can't use all of the original sounds from Sonic 3 and Knuckles, but they have been working really hard to adapt the original music that was composed in 1993 for Origins. This is not at all surprising, and I was frankly expecting this. If you don't know, and there are some videos that explain it very, very well, it's pretty obvious that Michael Jackson's music was used in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and they just never credited Michael Jackson at all. So most likely Sega, while they've never outright admitted it, they'd rather not have to go down that path one way or the other, redo some of the music, and then just kind of move along from another compilation of Sonic, right? And that's kind of where we are. So Sonic Origins coming out this week with redone music for Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Also, it does appear that Ubisoft is ramping up to finally release Skull and Bones. We were expecting it this fiscal year, but it looks like some ratings have been spotted. We can see this from Twisted Voxel, who says the game was recently rated in Brazil for multiple platforms, but there has been no mention of a possible PS4 or Xbox One version. The rating suggests it will be released for Google Stadia, PC, PS5, and Xbox Series X. So the fact that there's no Xbox One or PS4, yeah, they probably don't want to deal with those systems now, because I kind of think they're looking to just sort of get this game out the door and move along. It's been in development for so long. It's been rebooted reportedly several times, and I think they're just trying to figure out how to make it more compelling, because as it's been described, you're on the ship, you fight other ships, and you never get off the ship, and that's kind of it. It was Ubisoft realizing that, wow, the Assassin's Creed naval combat is popular. Let's try to spin it off into its own game. And I just don't think there's enough there to make it its own game necessarily for what they're envisioning. But they're going to take a shot. They'll push it out the door sometime in the next 12 months or so, and I'm sure they'll see if it catches on. If it doesn't, then they'll probably just move along pretty quickly. Oh, and real quick, speaking of Stadia, where Skull and Bones is going to be releasing on, we of course know that Google had planned to have like first-party studios that would create games specifically for the service, as well as fund different projects. Well, unfortunately, Google decided to shut down their first-party studios and seemingly shut down like funding and publishing, all these different things. Well, we're starting to find out which games were originally going to go to Stadia, but they still were able to come out though. This was posted up by Axios, saying Google was involved in the creation of 2 notable video games in the spotlight this month before the downsizing of its Stadia gaming operations sent those projects elsewhere. 2 sources familiar with their development tell Axios. Now, the 2 games, one of which just came out, that being the Quarry, that was published by Take-Two Interactive, so good news there. They came in able to get that done. And then one game that was revealed during the Xbox Game Showcase that will be heading to Game Pass is High on Life. That's from the co-creator Justin Roiland and their Squanch Game Studio, of course the co-creator there of Rick and Morty. So good to see these games are still able to come out despite Google Stadia pulling the plug pretty quickly on their idea around having a first-party studio set up and funding projects. Just didn't seem like it got going as fast as Google wanted it to, and they realized, wow, making games is hard and it takes longer than we thought. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with a couple of games that are being teased and apparently even leaked out through retailers. And I understand why a lot of people sent me this one in particular. I made a tweet around it being weird that Persona was announced for Xbox before Switch, which, hey, I mean, that tweet's gonna hold up even if Persona does get announced for Switch here soon, but we can see this posted up, and there were a couple of people who pointed it out. I believe Vish pointed it out, as well as Roku here with the screenshot of Persona 5 Royal being listed by a certain retailer. This was World of Games, and the box art's not final. It even says it like on the listing there, and retailers tend to leak stuff out, specifically with software. I don't really ever believe necessarily that a retailer posts anything about hardware early, because we've seen in the past that listings will go up talking about hardware and it's just not correct. It seems to be placeholders in case hardware goes up. And as someone who had to do a lot of ordering for software and hardware, we didn't really ever know hardware was coming out until everyone else did. And then we had to try to scramble to get our orders in. But software, we would know about early. And I mean, Persona 5 Royal heading to Switch seems to be, as weird as it sounds, the one that's up in the air. I believe Persona 3 Portable and Persona 4 Golden will go to Switch. The reason I don't necessarily know if Persona 5 Royal will is because it's Atlus, and Atlus just does some really weird stuff. Nate's been mentioning this on and off about like, oh, it's kind of up in there with Persona 5 Royal, and that would be the Atlus thing to do. There is a system that is incredibly popular in Japan, and you have games that I think lean into the idea of it being a portable system really well with these turn-based JRPGs that take a lot of time and would work well on the go. I mean, Persona 4 Golden was on the Vita for the longest time. That's where they decided to move the game to. The one other than that, Persona 3 Portable, is literally called Persona 3 Portable. As for this retail listing, I don't necessarily know if it 100% confirms that, yeah, Persona 5 Royal is going to the Switch, but I am gonna lean on the side of Persona 3 Portable, Persona 4 Golden, and Persona 5 are all going to the Switch, and that they probably will be announced in this Direct coming up. Just remember, Persona 5 Royal isn't coming to Xbox until later on this year, and then Persona 4 Golden and Persona 3 Portable aren't showing up until next year. And these are games that clearly Microsoft wrote a pretty big check to get on the Xbox, while I think Atlus and Sega would be a bit more interested in getting them on the Switch because it's this massive system in Japan and then also worldwide with over 100 million people who have bought a Switch. It still seems like something Atlus might mess up somehow. Like, we've questioned it before, we'll question it again. But I'm thinking it's getting announced. It would be very weird if we go towards the end of this year and we look at Persona 5 Royal releasing on the Xbox but not on the Switch. All we'd have to do is look around and say, well, I guess that's Atlus. Next up, let's talk about that Nintendo 64 expansion pack, as we had our final game in that roadmap that Nintendo had shown us before announced with a date. We can see this over on Twitter from Nintendo of America. Capture wild Pokemon on Pokemon Island with a camera. Pokemon Snap is coming to Nintendo Switch for Nintendo Switch Online, plus expansion pack members on June 24th. So later on this week, it will be coming out, and that'll complete, like I said, that roadmap that they had shown us previously when they first announced the Nintendo 64 expansion pack. This is still around the time when we thought it was going to be announced, because a lot of people obviously were expecting a Direct to take place last week. That's around the time this was revealed that Pokemon Snap would be heading to the service this week. And now we're kind of just hanging out like, all right, what exactly is next? Will we get a roadmap for another 5 or 6 Nintendo 64 games? Because then, I mean, almost the entire library is there now. But it might get to the point where Nintendo is like, okay, we've filled up the Nintendo 64 to what we believe is good enough. And that's kind of how Nintendo has been doing it. Is there enough there? Great. We'll let you know sometime soon when more games are showing up, and they could keep it spontaneous going forward, where 1 month it's a Nintendo 64 game and 2 Genesis games, or a Nintendo game thrown in there, and then things start to mix in, rather than say, okay, every month now going forward, there will be another Nintendo 64 game announced. But keep in mind, we're now expecting a Direct to take place next week, and we've now cleared the way with this Nintendo 64 roadmap to where maybe they want to announce that Game Boy or Game Boy Advance is heading to the service. That seems to be like the leading speculation now, is that they would be announcing a new system at this Direct. It's very possible, but I still kind of believe they'd rather wait to have some big announcement like that for a fall Direct that could fall more in line with when people's original subscriptions, when they did launch it in September, that would be running up. Like, that's typically how you want to do it, is then put people on the fence. It's like, oh, do I just keep this now because Game Boy and Game Boy Advance are heading to the service and 10 games are going to drop in later on this month? If you do that like now at the Direct, it may wear off a bit. And if you can kind of get people really excited around the time of that subscription re-upping, you'd probably keep a lot more people in the subscription service. But I still think they will do something with Nintendo Switch Online during that Direct. The question is, which way do they go with it? Do they announce that Game Boy and Game Boy Advance are coming, or do they announce that the next game in the series that they have with this release schedule is GoldenEye? Next up, let's talk about another game that's being teased that seems like it could be lining up with this rumored Nintendo Direct next week, and that being from Treasure. We can see this over on Twitter, translated using Google Translate. So here we go. On June 19th, 2022, Treasure Co. celebrated its 30th anniversary. This year, the 30th anniversary, we are working hard to announce the highly requested that title, that being in quotations. We look forward to your continued support of Treasure, which, of course, this has led people to try to guess at what exactly they're talking about here. If you look up and down their list of games, the first one they really broke onto the scene with was back on the Sega Genesis with Gunstar Heroes. Let me ask you, if they showed up with a new Gunstar Heroes, would you get excited about it? I would. I mean, we're starting to see kind of a resurgence here for some of these retro 2D style games. I mean, TMNT clearly hits on a nostalgia bone, and it is fantastic. I would love to see a new Gunstar Heroes game that still kind of keeps that same like pixel art retro feel, but has more modern features like online play brought in. Like that could be an absolute blast to play online. But then you look down the rest of their games, Guardian Heroes, Mischief Makers, Ikaruga. Could there be a new Ikaruga game coming out here? But the one that I see a lot of people point to is Sin and Punishment. And you have to remember, it has been a little while since Treasure has released a game. Back on the 3DS, they had Crusher, and before that, if you look towards the Wii, they did do Sin and Punishment, Star Successor, of course, with Nintendo, which is why, all right, let's say they do a new Sin and Punishment, it would probably be at this rumored Nintendo Direct, and I think it'd be kind of interesting to see that. I'm not too surprised that we didn't get a Sin and Punishment like in line with the Wii U, because a lot of franchises from Nintendo even just like skip the Wii U completely. I think Nintendo realized midway through probably wasn't worth starting up new projects on that system, and instead they pushed some of them to the Switch. Things like Mario Odyssey was probably being worked on originally for the Wii U. They were like, oh wait, let's just move it to the Switch. Obviously, Breath of the Wild was being worked on for the Wii U. There was a Wii U version of it. So looking at Sin and Punishment, how long Treasure's kind of been hanging out, maybe developing this title, I think that'd be a really cool thing to see. But hey, I'm always up for a new game for like the Gunstar Heroes kind of IP, or hey, a new Ikaruga, I'll take that too. But I guess we'll find out here soon. Seems like with the anniversary that they're celebrating, they're getting ready to announce something. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Halo Infinite, which needs a lot of help. I mean, I'll still play Halo Infinite a couple times a week, just going through some of the challenges, but it's pretty quiet on there. Not a lot of new stuff is happening necessarily. They're still working through their current season. Season 3 is supposed to be bringing in some new features and modes, and Forge in particular has been talked about quite a bit, in that they may be trying to launch it sooner rather than later. Yes, in beta form, but that way they can have people just try to break it, and then they can fix it from there. I mean, that's the idea of a beta that they would then release. But it looks like some footage is starting to get out there early, showing off some pretty deep features to this, like more so than I thought we were gonna go with this. There's been talks about entire scripting that would take place here, but look at this. This was over on Twitter. This posted by Rebs Gaming saying, leaked Halo Infinite Forge gameplay explains the weapon combining feature that allows you to create new weapon abilities. This is from Brad Guy 123 on YouTube. We have an entire video here going over it, and this is citing a glitch from Halo 5. I'll admit, wasn't that in Halo 5. I played it when it came out, went through the story, got really annoyed about it, and then tried the multiplayer, got really annoyed about that, went back to Master Chief Collection and felt much more at home. Nonetheless, there was a glitch in Halo 5 that was pointed out where you could kind of combine kind of like weapon effects. And in this case, it looks like in Halo Infinite, they are trying to have that not necessarily be a glitch, but a feature, something you can use in any of your building for Forge. So, for example, they showed off a BR basically blowing stuff up like if you were shooting a rocket. So the bullets can be explosive. And there are others that they were showing off with a plasma pistol, kind of electrocuting different vehicles. And to go along with that, they show off entire flowcharts. So you can build out entire scripts and set up. I kind of think campaign stuff, I feel like Forge is going to go way further than what we've ever seen. And if they can pull this off, it would be massive for Halo Infinite. Really, it would work to fix the main issue now, which is a lack of content, because the community will do it. And that's how it's always been, right? It's like, all right, if you guys aren't going to do it, the community will take care of it. On PC, it's been the modding community. And in this case, you can just have the Forge community kind of take the reins, say, hey guys, you work on your seasons. We're going to just start creating new content, game modes, maps, all this stuff for Halo Infinite. And that's something that worked really well back in the day with Halo 3, where a lot of game modes that people play now were created back then. So yeah, 343, get this out there sooner rather than later. I understand if it's in beta, things are going to break. It looks like there's just a lot going on here with Forge, but that can also lead to some awesome results and, like I said, patch the primary hole that Halo Infinite has now, which is a lack of content. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're going to take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I asked, does Persona 5 get announced for Switch in 2022? Oh, 65% say no, 35% say yes. I mean, at this point, when else are you going to do it? It's going to the Xbox. Seems like that exclusivity that people were assuming to be there with Sony having some deal with Atlas isn't the case anymore. I mean, if you're Atlas, there's probably a lot of money to be made on the Switch currently. I hope they have a physical copy at least of Persona 5 Royal. I understand P3 Portable and Persona 4 Golden will probably just be digital copies, but like Persona 5, it seems like it's been rumored for so long. There's a lot of anticipation around it. It'd be pretty disappointing if they didn't do it, but hey, that's Atlas. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Chomp saying, I'm happy Final Fantasy Crisis Core is getting a remake and it's coming to Switch, hoping it's a native port and not a cloud version because it looks fun. I think they have to disclose that already, especially when we were showing it off and when they had announced it. Part of the press release will probably say, oh, it's cloud on the Switch, so it should be a native port. But something I'm noticing is as we're seeing more and more of these third-party games get announced, a lot of people just go, wow, I hope that's not a cloud version on the Switch. What does that tell you about the current Switch? I will say even Hogwarts Legacy got me a little bit. I'm like, wow, it's really on the Switch. It's not like a cloud version. There's box art on Amazon for it currently. That tells me, though, that yeah, we kind of need a new Switch. Not necessarily a next-gen version, but some sort of hardware upgrade, because we're to the point now where a lot of these games don't even look as good as Final Fantasy VII Remake, which was on the PS4, or Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Like, Crisis Core isn't in that league when it comes to visual fidelity, but people still look at it and say, might just be cloud on the Switch. Maybe it is time for that hardware upgrade. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today, whether it's Persona on the Switch. Do you think that announcement happens this year? Or what about Treasure? What big game announcement do you think they're lining up? And then Halo Infinite. Can Forge really revitalize this game? Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.